Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone from around the world, from Australia, India, Italy, Germany, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, UK, and Vietnam. Welcome, mabuhay, Wan Ying Dai Cha. Welcome, everyone. We are so glad you are here with us at the Consumer Healthcare Training Academy webinar under the series of 2022 and beyond. Today's topic is about mental health and well-being from the human perspective. Our panelists for today will give us an overview of how the way we manage our lives affect our mental wellness and well-being. They will take us through some solutions and considerations on how to minimize and prevent mental ill health. But before I introduce our speaker and moderators for today, we are encouraging everyone to think about these questions while listening. What excites you? What concerns you? What would you like to know more about? What ideas do you have? And please feel free to pop those questions, ideas, and thoughts in our chat box. And our thought leaders will answer some of your questions toward the end of our session. We are very honored and very excited to have three thought leaders for today's webinar. Our speaker for today is Ms. Melissa Gale. Melissa is a counselor, an MHFA in England accredited instructor member who delivers adult and youth mental health first aid courses. She has an extensive previous commercial background, working more than 10 years within a stressful and demanding career, along with family life, working full-time with twin babies, and managing that work-life balance as best as possible. Since 2017, Melissa refocused her career path with her passion for mental health and well-being for all, incorporating voluntary and funded project work for a local charity counseling service and NHS CCG. Melissa strongly believes that with understanding, sensitivity, empathy, and authenticity, we can all help to look out for each other, take better care of ourselves, and make a difference in the world of well-being and mental health. Our second thought leader and first moderator for today is Mr. Dave McCaughan. Dave is our Consumer Healthcare Training Academy Senior Consultant and Trainer and a storyteller at Bibliosexual. Dave has over 30 years of rich experience in globally known advertising and communication companies. He has led Asia Pacific strategy planning, insights, and market researches for various famous brands. He has over 500 appearances globally and is a frequent writer and author for Advertising Age, Campaign Asia, Research World, and many other regional publications. Our second moderator for today is Mr. Steve Sowerby. Steve is the founder of Expotential and our co-founder of the Consumer Healthcare Training Academy. Steve has managed divisions and run companies in Italy, Spain, France, Central Europe, Eastern Europe, Thailand, Singapore, and East Asia. He is a passionate believer that brands are the most important asset of any business and that every department and each individual in an organization has the power to add value to these brands. And over the last 2 decades, Steve has been inspiring, motivating, developing, and building brands with more than 130,000 individuals in over 100 companies across the globe. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, help me please in welcoming our speaker and moderators for today, Ms. Melissa Gale, Mr. Dave McCaughan, and Mr. Steve Sowerby.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Thank you. And welcome, Melissa. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us on a topic which is really very close to my heart and something which I think is not really discussed as openly as it should be in consumer healthcare and in healthcare in general. And that is, of course, our mental health and mental wellness. And so it's wonderful to have you here, because I think we've discussed the macroeconomics, but actually this is the first time that we're really discussing it at the personal level, which is, of course, where it really matters.
I think this is going to be really interesting, Steve. Melissa and I had a conversation yesterday. Because of COVID, we've all been going under different sorts of mental stresses. I've been particularly interested in the way people are coping, particularly with things like work from home and etc. And I think we'll get into some of those subjects. And so it's about the real life. I think this session is interesting because it's not about theory, etc. It's about the real life challenges that we go through and how we're going to deal with it. And so I really welcome Melissa. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. So, Melissa, maybe you want to take us away.
Yeah, fabulous. And just really, first of all, just thank you for the wonderful introduction, Sheila, and to both of you, thank you for asking me to join you today. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and hello to your audience too. So yes, so today we are going to be talking about mental health, well-being, and I say from a human perspective because at the end of the day, we are human beings. And there is so much about us that we need to be connecting with, understanding about ourselves. And mental health wellbeing is such a huge topic. There's so much to cover, but we'll dive in and we'll start the discussion as well. So really it is for us to start with an understanding that our health is a treasured gift, okay? And we do really need to be taking care of it. We need to be looking after our health. It must be that number one priority. And really thinking about today, what I'd like you to hopefully go away with is asking yourself and really thinking about, am I taking care of myself? Am I taking care of my health? And are my surroundings conducive of that too? And so, of course, when we're looking after our health, the healthier we are going to hopefully be, and also therefore happier. The healthier, the happier we are more productive throughout our lives in every way. And that goes on into all of our environments, our home lives, our work, and our community settings too.
Yeah. And Melissa, just before we go into that, I think it sort of just brings up just what we were talking about earlier on, that me, are responsible for your health.
Yeah.
And it's something as an industry, sometimes we forget that the most important medicine or the most important solution is the individual. It's the person who is informed, empowered, and inspired to take care of his or her health. And as a role, as an industry, we need to support that. Not just through products, but through information, through inspiration, through empowerment with different tools and solutions. And it's something which, as a mantra, we need to keep repeating to ourselves, that ultimately it's that individual that is responsible, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we are responsible, and sometimes also we need a little bit of help and we need a bit of encouragement too, and that's okay. And it's understanding, you know, our focus is sort of on mental health here, but actually is about, as we spoke about earlier, Steve, it's that holistic approach. It's about our whole well-being. We're interlinked, you know, and if we're having mental health struggles, it will affect us physically, and the other way around too. So just coming on to some sort of brief fundamental facts for us just all to be aware of. And I've picked some figures here which are from here in the UK, and I realise your audience is global, but of course I'll come on to facts from statistics from the WHO as well, the World Health Organization. So here in the UK, we will have 1 in 4 people who will experience at some time in any given year a mental health struggle, mild to moderate, okay? Then 1 in 6 working age adults will be experiencing anxiety and depression or stress-related difficulties at any one time as well. So again, not quite sure of your audience numbers here, but I was saying earlier, you know, we're thinking that maybe, you know, let's just have a figure of 240. If we've got an audience of 240, there's going to be 60 people in that audience, in our audience right now, that could be having some mental health struggles, difficulties. and being aware that that does range on a scale, mild, moderate, and then it can obviously become that more severe too.
And just on that, 1 in 4, but I would hypothesize that most of the time we hardly ever admit to it. So the statisticians don't even know. Most of the time, people do nothing. They live with it. They struggle with it. They get on with life. They believe that's what's expected of them. And that's such a shame, because with some support, there could be solutions available to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So coming on to a further few figures as well, we have the Health and Safety Executive showing last year that more than half of Britain's lost working days in 2019-20 due to mental ill health. By Deloitte, we've got here the poor mental health costs of UK employers up to 45 billion a year, with over 14 million sick days. Then an important figure to be aware of relating to what you said, Steve, you know, that 70 to 75% of people with diagnosable mental illness receive no treatment at all. And a really key important thing that I want to stress also, which, mental health does predominantly develop over time. You know, it may come about because of a trauma incident, but more often than not, it develops over time. And therefore, you know, when it comes to our health, rarely, and it's very unlikely that there's a quick fix. So we'll be coming on to that later. But it's about those preventative measures, it's about the intervention. And then actually, if we are striking that time when it's really impacting on our daily functioning, you know, we want to be able to aid recovery and have a look at that as well. And then coming on quickly to the World Health Organization that states, so being mindful of everybody, that we've got people from around the world. Again, not that dissimilar in respect of who might be experiencing mental health conditions, and that's impacting them enough that it's classed as a disability. 1 in 5. It's very common. It's very common. Really want to stress that, because this is a part as well of us being able to reduce stigma, discrimination, and open up conversations around this. It affects all areas of life, and the 2 most common being depression, anxiety, and again here looking at how much globally that has an impact on the world. Astronomical. And then finally, when we're looking at stats, I wanted to bring into the equation, whilst I can appreciate that many of your audience are probably sort of looking at this from a work perspective and their employees, mental ill health for many will be triggered by early experiences. Half of mental ill health conditions will be by age 14.
Wow.
Okay, and most of these are not detected. And just looking at the bottom section of this screen, just addressing the fact that it says here, the consequences of not addressing adolescent mental health conditions extends to adulthood, impairing both physical and mental health and limiting opportunities to fulfilling lives, adult lives. And as a counsellor, you know, there are, it's not unusual that there will be a lot of underlying factors that have manifested over the years and are a vulnerability to people. And then life's challenges come, like they do for all of us. You know, life is stressful, it happens. But actually, sometimes things have not been addressed because we've not been ready to. We've not really understood what's gone on for us as young people. And we need to be aware of that when we go into adult life, because that fundamentally is part of our vulnerability, maybe part of our makeup when we go into the adult sort of career setting.
And you know, as I was saying before we came on live, you know, I was really interested, some stuff I heard, well, a number of years ago now, but about longevity and about the way in which mental and physical health issues before you're 10 will affect your longevity. And I guess we all get the fact that if you're malnourished as a kid, that will affect things. We forget the fact that, you know, even for kids under 10, there are often mental issues going on, maybe reflective of mental stresses going on with their parents and the rest of the family that actually affect them, and then will have, you know, may take years to sort of rise to the surface again, or will not obviously be seen. So I think this is really important. And one of the things that as we go forward, I know you're going to talk about, as employers, what people should be doing or thinking about, etc. But we have to remember, you know, as employers, as businesses, and our employees are quite often parents, and how is their mental ill health affecting their children and the children's potential ill health? And then that, of course, becomes a vicious circle of, you know, the family getting worse and worse. So all really interesting things to be thought about, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's not just, I think it's also not just, of course, you're super important in terms of the employees, but the impact that consumer healthcare industry can have on communities. And, you know, the link is absolutely clear between mental health and physical health, of psychology and physiology. The biology even shows us this huge impact of you know, physical conditions causing mental illness and vice versa. So there is also elements that we can do as an industry to consider the mental health and the mental wellness of our communities, no matter what conditions that we're seeking to treat with our different products. If we can start to support that at any age, because that was the frightening thing for me, that this starts, 50% of mental health conditions really start by the age of 14. So it really does impact large numbers of lives of our children, and of course, as they grow into adulthood. Sorry, Melissa, off you go.
No, and it's really crucial that, you know, it's like part of that intervention, if you like, it is getting back to the start, and the start is when we're younger, you know, and there are so many vulnerabilities that we're experiencing and stresses, and there's all sorts of reasons why mental ill health may start to manifest, and that can be sort of individual vulnerabilities in respect of being a premature child, maybe, you know, in respect of you know, being a premature baby, also maybe a disability or physical illness and so forth. Then we come on to experiences at school, our home environments, our community environments. There's so many things there that can impact in that respect. But really also what I want to, from my experience as well, and just really sort of trying to impress here, that mental health and mental ill health, we need to understand that mental health is just like we talk about physical health. It's a state. It's a state of being, and sometimes it's not so good and sometimes it's better. Okay, and then there are things that may start to happen where we're starting to struggle and mental ill health can develop. So we need to understand when we're talking about mental health, we're not just defaulting to mental ill health. Yeah, so mental health, like our physical health, can fluctuate through our lifetime because of stresses and strains going on, whatever that might be. And we are all susceptible. We all have a tipping point. All of us have a tipping point. You know, and it's often looked at, again, trying to be mindful and thinking about stigma and discrimination, again, that it's often viewed as a sign of weakness. However, when we get to know the person, when we really get to know that person, what's been going on behind that person, their story, often what is the case is quite the contrary to us thinking that this is a weak situation. It's very often the fact that this person has been resilient. They've been through so much. They are determined, and they've continued to push through their challenges. They've continued to push through adversity, and they've pushed really hard that there's only so much that one can take, and that starts to impact in various ways. And that's where, again, linking back to that intervention prevention, we need to stop or be aware, not ignoring those signs, or be aware of what those signs are, because that's when it can catch us out. And it's actually, again, it's actually being aware of that. So because of COVID as well, what I wanted to bring into the mix here is, of course, thinking about COVID and the impact in the workplace. So we're talking about mental health and wellbeing, of course, generally, but also homing in on the more recent unfortunate events. And again, you know, for many countries, organisations, there's been a huge impact. There has been a huge impact. There's been transition from office into the home, adapting our lifestyles, increased online connections, furloughing, I don't know whether that's a phrase known as worldwide, but furloughing, fear of job loss, increasing your job responsibilities, depending on your industry. Some people it's minimized, some people it's expanded considerably. That loss of office environment and being together has been something that's come up a lot for me. Along with that diminished human connection and that social interaction and that laughter and spontaneity that we all experience from one another when we are in an office. And what is sort of really showing up really for many of us as well is the fact that, again with COVID, it has impacted on us very individually. It's not all been bad. There's a lot of people have experienced change of circumstances positively. So it hasn't all been bad, but actually it's not been good either for many of us. So we need to be aware that it's impact on people very differently. One thing is for sure though, is that what is starting very much to show up are the sort of negative psychological impacts of the fact that we are human, as we started that sort of at the beginning, that human perspective, and we thrive on connection in a big way. So it's been,
Melissa, I saw something really interesting just yesterday that it was somebody who's been looking at surveys over the last 6 months. So I'm sure everybody that's in this session has seen on Facebook and other social media tons and tons of surveys about, would you like to work from home? Would you like to go back to the office, or would you like a mix? And what this was showing was these couple of people had looked at a whole lot of these surveys over the last 6 months. And what they'd noticed was that, not surprisingly, 6 months ago, vast majority of people were work from home. But very quickly, it started to get more and more of a mix, right? Of, oh no, I want to be, and what they've seen is now, just in the last couple of months, is an increasing proportion of people saying, no, I'd like to go back to the office full time. Now, that it's not the majority, it's like 20%, 25% of the people in most surveys, right? But their point was that if you went back even 6 months ago, what is now 25% of people saying, I want to go back to the office full time, was like less than 10%. And their feeling is that this is just evidence of what you're talking about, which is that people are just missing the connection more than anything else. And, in the work I've been doing on the way people cope with work from home, one of the things that I've found very interesting is this idea that's been promoted now as accidental ideation deprivation. So the idea that when you're sitting in the office or in the fact where you're going to work, you're more likely to just accidentally come up with ideas through the casualness of conversations, the casualness of interactions, which doesn't happen on Zoom calls, let alone sitting on your couch or in your back room or wherever you're trying to work. So and there's a lot of other examples. I think this is really a really interesting area that we're going to see. This obviously global social experiment that we've gone through in the last 12 months is going to show up a lot of differences in the way in which we may think about interaction and the desire to actually be with other people. And yes, you're right. I know people that are have loved the fact that they've spent more time at home and reconnected with their kids and, all that sort of stuff. But an awful lot of people are sort of but that's not always the case, right?
And I think there's a few little pointers that I can't come to in shortly about connection, but also, whoever sort of had a future in mind that we would still be dealing with COVID now. So I think in those early stages as well, it was a bit novelty. We're working from home for quite a few people. It was like, okay, this is maybe something they've been wanting to do for a long time. But actually, then it's gone on for longer. And then it's gone on for longer. And that for some, that novelty has worn off, and obviously then the impact. So until we actually experience these things, we don't really know. And as you said, Dave, you know, there's a mixture coming up now in how people feel about that going into the office, at home, and so forth.
Right.
So let's just have a look now. We've got a little poll, I believe, that's going to show up for us. So just a little assessment for the audience to consider, and it's nothing too detailed. It's a little assessment here. Where I want you to consider, okay, is 10 is feeling is great, okay, is your understanding of where you are at. In respect of the first question, how would you rate your self-awareness? And what I mean by that, as it says here, is how in tune do you think you are in respect of your feelings that come up, why they do, you know, your emotions, those signs of stress, and your behavior. How self-aware are you of that? Would you say you're really great at that? Okay. So have a think about that. And then the next question to ask is, how would you actually rate your self-care? So it's about rating your self-awareness and then your self-care. So actually, when it comes to your self-care, how great are you or conscious are you of eating well, having regular downtime, exercising, socializing and connecting? What are your regular sort of self-care habits? How would you rate yourself at that?
I would say that probably 8 out of 10 for self-awareness and probably 3 out of 10 for self-care.
Yeah.
Is what I would say.
It's interesting. The way that you've just framed those, I would go the opposite. I'd say self-aware, really? I was maybe 5. Right. Self-care, I think I'm an 8 or a 9.
Wow, that's great.
I think, but see, I think that's well, in my case, I think the self-care comes about because of that, partly because of the last 6 months. For the first time forever, I went and got physical checkups and things.
Yeah.
And reached a certain birthday where I went, oh crap, I might have to do something to make sure that I stay alive a bit longer. So I have been more active in these things. But the way you frame self-awareness is something that I guess, to what Steve said earlier, it might be my generation or whatever, Australian men who sort of, well, you don't think about that stuff, let alone talk about it. So, you know, that's why it just struck me that way. Anyway.
And there's no right or wrong answer, of course, and this is very unique to each individual. But I think what again it does, and what I like to create, I suppose, in these sort of circumstances, is just for people to really just think about what's going on for them. What does tend to show up a lot of the time when I do ask this question, more so than not, is people tend to indicate that they have a higher self-awareness than they do self-care. So that it's like they do know, but actually that self-care is pretty much way down the list because life's busy, or whatever those reasons, but a lot of the time life's busy.
But Melissa, there was an interesting comment from Alison in the audience who made a great point that the UK really pushed the daily walk during the COVID time. Go out, get some exercise. The amount of cycling that went up during that period, but the governments in France and Spain actually restricted it. You were not allowed to go outside in the lockdown, and so that, I think, has had a very positive impact in the UK, and perhaps not so positive in other countries where people continue a good behavior. So I think we may see those numbers sort of getting higher in the UK as a result of COVID, and maybe lower in some other markets as well. But this important element of self-care is
it's interesting you say that, because it's interesting you say that, Steve, because last week I was looking at some research from Google in Thailand and the Philippines that was pointing out that amazingly to me, but it was saying that the percentage increase in people who have started thinking and actively doing exercise in the last 12 months in those two countries went up by something like 25%.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, right? Because I just assume you just, because I grew up in the Australian culture, right? So, you know, we take exercise sort of as an assumption. But it was really, you know, I think that there are the side issues of COVID that have led to those different sorts of things about exercise, or just looking at gardens, you know, appreciating looking at greenery, those sorts of things. So.
Yeah,
and that has been one of the impacts of COVID. I think for many people has been a bit of a reality check, hasn't it, for that being aware of their own health, and because of their vulnerabilities due to this horrid virus, and really making that conscious effort to really try and get that health back on track. Yeah. So coming on to the 3 points here in adding on to the sort of self-awareness and self-care. So what makes us more susceptible? I mean, there is, gosh, so many I could bring here, but let's be looking at, you know, that poor parenting, impactful negative childhood experiences, abuse, traumatic events, illness, disability, stigma, discrimination, poor education, housing and so forth, relationship breakdowns, loss of job finances, illness and more, lack of autonomy. So many things. They are huge. But again, coming back and relating it in respect of our understanding how soon mental health can actually start, the starting point, you know, fundamentally it's our foundations. You know, we want our foundations to be as supportive and healthy as possible, to create a solid foundation so that as we grow older we are able to be more resilient and take the knocks in life. And therefore, of course, you know, if we don't have such a solid foundation and we're impacted when we're younger, that just means that maybe our vulnerability is a little bit more exacerbated by those challenges as we get older, and we need to be aware of that.
Well, I mean, resilience is an important term there, because I mean, you described there sort of that's life. Life hits us with all of these things that makes us more vulnerable. What can we do in terms of becoming more resilient? Because this is inevitable. We can't control so many of the things that were in that list. So how do we protect our mental wellness, our mental health through resilience?
So that's key. And I think I'll come on to that in just a moment with one of our additional slides, because it is about taking notice, and it falls into that being taking care of ourselves, and we're in a better place as well to be able to help others too. So if that's okay, Steve, we'll come on to that just very shortly.
Yes, of course, absolutely, please.
And leading on from sort of those why we're susceptible, and then our daily stresses that we're impacted by, again, all those things that we may be managing, but also thinking about the stresses that we perhaps choose as well. You know, so there are works, there's relationship, a home environment. We could have children we're looking after, elderly ones, caring for people. You know, what food are we eating? How much alcohol? Alcohol has a huge impact on developing and exacerbating mental health struggles, and it has a huge impact statistically on suicide rates. Alcohol really does have such a key part in being detrimental to our health. So really, I'm not talking about, you know, if you have your glass of wine a day or every other day. I'm talking about sort of quite significant amounts of alcohol. If you're using that in your capacity on a regular basis to manage your stress, really think about that. Think about your sleep. And again, coming back to that downtime, repair time. I hear it so much. I'm too busy. Everyone's got a full diary. Where is your downtime for you? It's so important. And then, of course, how we're thinking about things. You know, are our thoughts helpful? Are our thoughts real, or is it what we're perceiving?
Well, to that point again, yesterday, I think it was, Melissa, you and I were talking about commuting. And one, again, as I was looking at coping with working from home, you know, it was really interesting the number of times this comes up as I've looked at this across different Asian markets, that people talk about that commuting is something they really miss.
Yeah.
And they really miss it because, in a sense, it's the definitive third place.
Yeah.
It's the place you can be for however long it is, where you're not at home, you're not at work, you're somewhere in between.
Yeah.
And it may be a place where you're with somebody else and talking, or just listening to the radio, or reading a book, or just staring into space. But it's, in a sense, downtime that was forced upon you. And then when it's not there, you suddenly realize, wow, that's 2 hours a day that I'm not getting to just do nothing, you know, or whatever you do during your commute, right? But it's an unusual thing, because if you'd said to people 12 months ago, they'd have said, no, commuting causes stress. And now what we're finding is, well, yeah, maybe it does because of certain circumstances, but it also helps you relieve or get that downtime.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, Dave, the number of people who've said to me, you know, I've spent 8, 9, 10 hours in front of the screen, sitting down, and I'm exhausted, physically exhausted. And, you know, so you're not getting that release that you would get from getting up and walking to the coffee room or going around.
I should point out that 8 or 9 hours does not include watching our webinars, right?
Yeah, of course. You can, you know, the audience, you can get up, you can walk around while watching the webinars. We don't mind. We don't mind.
That's right. Just sit there doing this. Just, you know, move your arms around.
So signs we're overly stressed. This is not, again, what I'm sharing here is not really anything new, but it's just for us to really think about, you know, again, a little bit of a reminder for all of you. Please just have a look and take note of what's going on for you. Don't be ignoring the signs. You know, are you eating more or less? Are you, again, coming back to drinking, are you drinking more? You know, are you not sleeping well? Headaches, aches, pains, you've got stomach ulcer. These are all signs of potential stress that is going on and repeatedly happening, and it's relentless in your life. We all have stress and we all need to manage stress, but is it chipping away and manifesting and showing up here in these various potential conditions? And the fact that stress can then lead to, you know, anxiety, depression, and mental health conditions that are going on. So notice these signs, don't ignore them. Please don't ignore them. Okay, we need to be that self-awareness coming into play again. So then we were sort of thinking about, you were asking the question about sort of resilience, Steve. And I think that, again, it's coming down to our own responsibility, and also thinking about our compounding habits. Whatever habits you've got going on, they are compounding, whether they are good or not so good. Okay, so really think about that, because what you're doing today, tomorrow, the next day will be showing up. Remember when I said at the very beginning that usually, and whether it's mental health or physical health conditions, they don't just happen. They show up because of overtime, because of the way that we have had an experiencing our lifestyle. So it's starting to look about taking care of our lives, looking at what we're doing with our food, with our lifestyle, meditation, the plethora of information that's available to us to start looking at managing our lifestyles and start getting that balance in place.
Yeah, there was actually, Melissa, there was a question also. Could one of those solutions be proven OTC options, medicines that would help people or help people with stress and anxiety? Is there, you know, can we rely on a drug, on a natural medicine, or what?
That's a question you're asking me. I personally don't like the phrase to rely on a drug. Okay, and I think medicine is part of our society that helps us to be well, but I also would hope for people that medicine alone often isn't enough, and that we need to take responsibility again in managing our lifestyles. So whether we have a mental health vulnerability struggle, anxiety, depression, or we have, it might be diabetes, for instance, you know, and you need insulin. Well, okay, you need insulin to then hopefully contribute to you being well, but insulin alone, you'll need to then look at your diet and your lifestyle. Yes. So if you have mental health struggles, having a pill will help perhaps for you. Perhaps it won't, perhaps it will, but you still need to be looking at fundamentally your lifestyle, because that alone is unlikely to help. Exactly. And just sort of sharing, as I mentioned to you before we went live, you know, I'm 50 now, and my lifestyle is, I think, pretty okay. And I run, and I do lots of activities and so forth. In my 20s, quite interesting in view of the times we're in now. In my 20s, I fell ill after a really bad cold flu, and I actually had ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, for several years, and I was really, really poorly. Slowly but surely I got better. I am a total believer that it's an organic illness, and I'm a total believer you can recover. It just does take time. After about 5 years or so, things were changing for me, but actually having a sort of illness like that impacts on you in your social life, your work life, your connections and so forth. I had a change of relationship, and things just got on top of me, because I was like thinking, gosh, you know, where am I at in my life? I'm now sort of 30, I've been poorly, and I had a spell where I was really anxious, and I had anxiety. I had some medication for that for about a year, and that helped. It helped in balance with other things. So it can help, but I do think we also need to be very careful of and mindful of our lifestyle. Yes. It's one of the many solutions that is there, and it's the combination of lifestyle solutions and OTC medicines or pharmaceutical solutions that actually is the right answer. So very good, thank you. So then coming on to our next slide. So correlating with, you know, we're working from home now, is just a few little pointers here as well about healthy habits from home. You know, we've heard or we've mentioned sort of how connection is so really, really key, and also that downtime, but human connection, and that really is about not just communicating is providing information, you're sharing information, but connecting is about that moment where we get to know our colleagues a little bit better, we get to understand their personality, their character, you know, we really do start to bond. And that connection, that bonding, has been lost considerably so because of working remotely. So think about the way that you are engaging if you're still continuing to work remotely. Think about, you know, having spontaneous catch-up, like a swing-by coffee break, where you can suggest it to colleagues. It's a time that somebody might suggest, but you don't have to attend. But you can swing by for 10 minutes, not to talk about work. Let's not talk about work. Remember that when we're connecting, usually that happens in the gaps of the day at work, when you're at the coffee machine, when you go and grab lunch together. It's in those moments that we need to try and bring back together with connection. Instead of having a meeting like this, can you not have a meeting maybe outside or walking and talking, rather than sitting? They say that, going back to your quote, Steve, you were saying about sitting at a desk for 10 hours. I don't know whether any of you guys have heard this, but the new phrase I've heard recently is that sitting is the new smoking. Yes, I've heard that. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So let's get up and walk around, have a meeting, talking, have your video camera on. Again, I don't know whether your audience, you know, maybe you traveled, you were backpackers when you were younger. Do you recall, you know, when you went to a hostel? Now, if you didn't go over to connect to people, you could be quite lonely and you could have an okay experience, but actually you have to put yourselves out there a little bit and go to connect and go to engage. So try and have your video cameras on. I've heard about people not having their video cameras on. Oh yes. How can you connect? We need to see each other. We need to see your lovely faces. We need to connect that way. It's actually it's actually interesting you say that. So I'm doing a long-term project now with a division of a very, very large global company,
And there's a group of about 25 people that are involved with this in a few different Asian countries. And over the 12 months, what I noticed was that when we first all had to work from home, of course, everybody started, some people had never used Zoom, etc., very much, and we're all getting used to it. Very quickly, people sort of got comfortable with using it. And then, what happened was, just like the rest of the world, around the middle of last year, half the group discovered Zoom backgrounds, right? And then what happened was right at the end of last year, beginning of this year, literally, if it was a meeting of 10 people, over half of them would not put the camera on at all.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is that after a discussion, what's happened is inside that group, we raised the issue that, well, wait a minute, but we'd like to actually, so we could go weeks and be talking to people every single day, but never see them. Yes. And so one of the things was, how about we create a rule that you have to have the camera on, and more importantly, you have to have the camera on, but you cannot use Zoom backgrounds. You actually have to, so that we can actually see the environment you're in.
Very good.
And this was actually, the company actually happens to be Japanese, but there's almost no Japanese people in this group, right? They're from all over the world. But it actually goes back to something I learned in my 10 years living in Japan, which is that when you look at somebody, when I look at you now on camera, Melissa, actually I'm more interested in that picture behind your shoulder than I am looking at your face. And I've noticed that Steve today, this is like the second or third time we've been on camera with each other today, and he's now using this vague thing so that the background has all gone all very unclear, right? So it's more important to be able to see the things that are around people, the environment they're in, Hey, what's that picture? Well, what's going on? Is it sunny there? Well, it looks like it's sunny, right? So I'm sitting in a cold bedroom, on a winter night in Sydney, as you can see, if I look around the room, and you can all see because I'm living in a temporary place and I've got nowhere else to sit. But all of that actually adds to what you're talking. That's part of what you're talking about.
That's part of who you are. Yes.
That's part of who you are.
And another really key thing as well, just as you can see in sort of highlighted at the bottom, boundaries, they really are necessary and part of self-care. It doesn't mean they have to be rigid, they can be flexible, but we need to look at those boundaries so that we set time for ourselves to have that downtime, okay? Be thinking about that. So then coming on to the next few slides, we've just got 3 more. So yeah, early intervention prevention is and supporting recovery key. There's a long list here and I could go into delving about each one of them in so many ways. So I just really want to, just a whistle stop sort of tour. We need to have more education and understanding around mental health and mental ill health, all right? People who are struggling with mental ill health, as I said earlier on, might be mild, moderate to more severe. And that may mean different types of support, which may mean accessing, of course, different sort of access points within your own countries, whatever that might be. It may just purely be self-help at the beginning and a supportive network. But mental health is part of our whole well-being, just as our physical health is. The use of language we use, big subject, okay, big subject. We really need to be mindful as well of the language we're using, guys. Yes. Please be thinking about language. Maybe we could be considering, rather than someone is suffering from, someone is living with or experiencing.
I like that very much.
Just to explain, I had a client once in the counselling room. This is not a mental health matter. She had sort of mental ill health sort of struggles, but part of her process that she shared was that as a young person, she was diagnosed with diabetes. And she made it very clear in one particular session, really angry, really strongly, stating, I am not a diabetic, I'm a person living with diabetes. And I think we have to be really mindful of that in respect of all labelling, okay? Yeah. Someone is not their illness, they are a person who is living with. And this opens up the sort of door, if you like, and understanding that recovery is always possible and very likely as well. And what I mean by recovery doesn't necessarily mean cure, but it means that that person has got the support mechanisms in place. They might have the lifestyle then that's being worked at, they might have the medication, and then they can be fully functioning, and they can be holding down their job, and they can be doing very well. So please be mindful of language that we're using. It is something we have to be aware of. And then sort of, in our workplaces, in our environments, keyword phrases: empathy, listening. Everyone has a unique experience. When you're listening to your friend, colleague, please try and listen to their experience and try to create environments that enable people to talk freely if they've got a bit of trouble coming up for them. And of course, then accessing support earlier. Now that can be the accessing support, depending on where they're sitting in that sort of spectrum, if you like. It might just mean that they need to have a little bit of a support, self-help, maybe there's a charity that can help. Maybe it's then accessing a counsellor or their GP. It might be, if we're in a crisis situation, emergency services, but hopefully we're not going to get to that point. Counselling, huge. Please, people, please be thinking about this before you need it. Counselling is an amazing process that enables us to take us from separate to our day-to-day world, and where we can talk freely and talk to somebody in a confidential setting. It can be amazing, okay, and that can be a really great preventative tool where you can access maybe through your medical provider, access privately through your GP, however it works in your own country. So again, we're talking about early intervention, prevention, always better than cure. So just trying to encapsulate everything today. Got to look after yourself. Remember healthy habits. You know what needs to be sort of looked at. We need to be looking at our food, our exercise, managing our stress, being connected with people. And I know this might sound a little bit simple, but what does make you feel good? What makes you laugh? Where's the laughter gone? We seem to miss that when we become adults. We used to have it so much more so maybe when we're younger. And laughter is, after all, they say it's nature's best medicine. So there are lots of benefits to that. So to take care of yourself, each other, and your people. And then finally, we've got the 3 tips that I'm coming on to. So would you like to go on to that now, or is there anything you'd like me to?
Let's, I was going to say, what would be the 3, if you like, tips or recommendations that you would give to the audience then, Melissa? And then we might have time for one more question.
So I found it really a bit of a struggle to really nail down to 3, but I think I just decided to focus in the workplace setting. And with that, as you can see, I think it's hugely important to try and create environments, your workplaces, that are trusting. Trust is a huge aspect of people being able to feel safe, inclusive, and being able to open up. That coincides with being reasonable. The landscape has changed immensely since COVID, and a lot of us have had our hands tied in respect of what we've gone on to experience, adapting, working from home, and our mindsets would have said once upon a time, no, but actually they've gone, oh, actually this is all right, this isn't so bad, so let's be reasonable, let's open our minds up to maybe new ways of working. And then I think it's really instrumental that our business owners and our line managers have a genuine commitment to investing in a healthier workplace. They need to be role models. They need to be embracing it genuinely, not just as a tick box criteria, but really embracing a healthier culture and a supportive culture, and having various wellbeing events within their organisations. So they're my 3 top tips.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Very, very good tips. And I think we have time for one question just in that last minute, and I'm going to bring it in from Khalid, who has asked something really, really relevant to this age that we're living in, which is how to address the mental health issues due to the intergenerational gap, with the younger generations being more guided, more controlled, more influenced by social media, which has caused a lot of mental issues and health issues. Melissa, what kind of quick tips might you give or ideas around that?
Gosh, yeah, that's a big question. It does come up a lot when I'm doing training, especially within school settings. And again, I think there's a mixture of things come up quickly. What can I say? I think social media can be absolutely brilliant. And of course, it can be very detrimental. And I think just like we may have to educate our children around alcohol, drugs and so forth, we need to be engaging with our children and educating them appropriately. We also need to be sort of educating and trusting to a certain extent, because they do find their way. They're going to be using it probably a lot more so than us of our age, our generation. You know, the big organizations have a lot to look into in respect of what can be accessed online, but that's sadly out of my remit. But I think really it's about what we can potentially safely control as parents. But I think it comes down to education. It really comes down to education and making sure and hoping that our children are making the right choices in what they're seeing and viewing. It's a minefield, that one. It is a minefield,
yes, something definitely that will take probably a few hours of webinar in itself. Absolutely. Brilliant. Well, we've come to the end. So thank you from our side. Really interesting, Melissa. It's lovely to touch the human side of these topics, because sometimes as an industry, as an audience, we're flying above the clouds, and really healthcare and mental health and physical health really happens with people and humans, and we really need to remind ourselves of that. Dave, any last words from you before we hand over?
No, I thought it was a really great discussion. You know, the very early bit where you discussed the actual financial loss that's involved with companies, I just want to remind everybody about that. If you haven't done so, please also go back and have a look at the session we did with Ophelia from the Global Wellness Institute, which was again about the financial implications of mental wellness overall. And I think that if you are a manager or you've got anything to do with managing people, this is really an important issue you should be thinking about more. Yeah. And I'm reminded of a HR director who worked with me for a number of years, who always used to say, always ask every single person who works for you, how are you doing and how are you feeling? And make sure you understand the difference between those two things. And I think that's lots of great tips, Melissa. Thank you very much.
And can I just end on one note, going back right to the very beginning? As I said, your health is a treasured gift, and we really do need to be taking care of it.
Very good point. Very good point. Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On behalf of the Consumer Healthcare Training Academy, Melissa, Dave, and Steve, thank you so much for this very insightful and inspiring session. I'm sure everyone actually are now inspired to start looking within ourselves, within our families, our organizations most especially, and starting with this journey and embracing fully that needed change. Thank you. Maraming salamat, Sheshe. Thank you for joining us tonight. Just in case you'd like to continue this very important conversation, please join us on LinkedIn accounts, which will be flashed up quickly. And do know as well that we will be sending our today's webinar recordings over email and our panelist insights to your questions by early next week. And we would like to encourage you as well to please stay tuned for our July webinar. Would like to thank you again, everyone, and may you all have a great rest of the day, lovely evening, and you please take care and stay healthy, please, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.